Hello and welcome to Your County. I'm your host, Lynn Turner Fitzgerald. Derek Yeager joins us today. Derek is Director of Yellowstone County Disaster and Emergency Services. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you guys for having me.
And you're relatively fresh to the position, right?
I am actually. I just started here. I'm certainly not new to the work, but I did just start work here in Yellowstone County right around the 1st of August.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your background.
Well, it's fairly varied, but along the same lines as disaster and emergency service work. I did wildland fire professionally for about 22, 23 years.
Oh, wow.
And all sorts
Pretty
of...
much up here in the West?
You know, I was actually active in about 22 different states and a couple
Oh.
of different countries, just working with different groups, teams, crews. Got to travel around a lot, really enjoyed that, but it's age is everything in that world.
Well, that's hard work.
It is.
It's dangerous
It's
work.
very hard, very physical, a lot of travel, a lot of time away.
Yeah.
Not super conducive to family life and
No.
domestic affairs. It's kind of one of those lifestyle jobs. Really enjoyed my time there, learned tons, met great people, had fantastic experiences, but it was just time to focus on something else. You know, when those kinds of things start to consume your life, it's time to build life.
Yeah.
Got out of that and went and managed the city county 911 center for a couple of years, and I've been a fire chief of a volunteer fire department out in Laurel. I'm originally from there, and so I spent, I think, not quite 10 years volunteering off and on as I could in between traveling and work and everything, and then got the opportunity to come over and work for the county, and started right around the 1st of August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, fire is apparently in your blood.
It is, yeah. It's something I've enjoyed since I was very young, and always enjoyed both fire and the outside,
Yeah.
outdoors, and that was a big part of life for a very long time.
Well, I'm curious about wildfires and all that you have seen. How do they differ? How do they vary? Is it regional? Is it the fuel?
Oh yeah, I mean, fire. The existence of fire is predicated on the type of fuels, the topography, and the weather. And depending upon what sort of fuels and what region of the country you're in, or even what country you're in, cause, you know, there's lots. By far the most prevalent cause of fire is humans, and but in other areas there's a lot of natural cause fires, and certain kinds of fuels can have a heavier influence on the fire's development and growth and spread than in other areas.
Yeah.
So for example, our area, we have fires pretty much every day, but you don't see them, you don't read about them, you don't hear about them, even most people don't even know. Here the weather is the primary influencing factor. If it's hot, dry, hasn't rained, and there's a breeze, you're going to see it, you're going to hear about it, you're going to know about it.
Yeah.
But if there's not, it doesn't mean that there's no fire. It just means that the potential for that to evolve into a very significant event is very low. We call it resistance to control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering about the Yellowstone fires. Was that 1988?
1988.
That caused a lot of discussion about management.
Yes.
Now, tell me about the arguments there. What was really the big takeaway?
You know, it's a significant conversation that it's actually never stopped since then. And I think Yellowstone maybe is the most obvious example. It doesn't mean the conversation just started there, but it's certainly the most obvious and memorable example of a decision when land managers had decided that fire should be allowed to play a role uninhibited by suppression effort, play its intended role in nature. There's unending opinions, and some of
both
them very
sides.
well informed. Both sides of that argument, and I'm certainly not here to propose one's better than the other.
Right.
But, you know, there's a prevailing thought process that fire does have a role in nature, and should be allowed when safe to do so, and to take that role in nature, to clean up forest fuels on the floor, to burn, to invigorate life. There's species of trees and shrubs that actually need fire.
Well, I'm remembering something about that it was
Mhm.
causing pods or something to explode, creating new growth.
Yep. So it's certainly not every species of tree,
Right, right.
but there are some, particularly pines, that the seed for new tree is enveloped in the cone, and that
Okay.
cone requires fire to open the cone. And you, if you simply Google it, you can find time lapse photography.
Oh, really?
It's really kind of a neat thing. But you can actually, the seed for that new tree is in the cone, and the cone requires fire and that intense heat for a short duration of time to spread that, to drop seeds to the forest floor, which naturally seed the forest.
Fascinating.
Yeah. It's
How
kind
do
of a
those
neat thing.
seeds then survive the fire? I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but I'm
Sure.
really curious about it.
Sure. It's a process, so not every seed does.
Okay.
Perhaps it's one in several thousand. It's a matter of residency time for the heat. So a lot of people tend to look at forest or wildland fires and compare them to, say, structure fires. Super intense heat for a very long time, and you look at that, how can anything ever survive that? Not every wildland fire is that. There's fires that move very quickly, and that's called residency time. And so residency time at the base near a tree, the amount of heat for how long really determines the survivability for both the existing fuels and trees, but also the seed. Some of those seeds are picked up by mice. Some
Okay.
of them are
Oh,
picked
sure.
up by birds. They're transported to other areas. Squirrels, they bury them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we have a tree.
Now we have a tree.
Okay, well, closer to home, there are areas in Yellowstone County certainly that are heavily wooded, residential areas. Talk to me about mitigation, because it's not out of the question that wildfire could occur here right inside the county.
Yeah, so we're actually, great timing on the discussion. We're going through a process required of us by the state of Montana. It's called the Community Wildfire Protection Planning Process. And it's fairly involved. It includes environmental engineers, scientists going through, looking at where the developments are, what fuels they're in, how many fires under what weather conditions. It's a fairly extensive and involved process, but by and large, wildland fire is our number one threat in this county. We certainly have other threats, and those are things that we focus on very, very consistently. But as far as the frequency, wildland fire is certainly one of the things that we key in on. We have hundreds upon hundreds of them every year. It's not unusual to have anywhere between 300 to 800 wildland fires occur in the entirety of the county, from one end to the other every year. The majority of those are human caused. Mitigation is something that people can do
Right.
to manage their own property in certain ways that don't necessarily guarantee you'll never suffer the impact of a fire, but it can lessen the severity of that. And what it also can do is give responding forces the opportunity to quickly and easily minimize the harm to your property, whether that be your home, your land. There's a number of different things that can be done. So, we don't have large spanning national forests in Yellowstone County, but there are places that are heavily wooded. And in those places, you look at things like the flame length and the duration that the fire is going to burn in and around your structure, how close, what kind of heat impact that your structures are going to take or your property is going to take. There's selective thinning, things simply like mowing grass and weeds, keeping them away from things that you find value in.
Yeah, because that's potential fuel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to just feed the
In
fire.
a wildland fire, anything that is combustible is just the next fuel source.
Yeah.
Firefighters really look to try to intervene in certain places and have to sometimes, depending upon the severity, and that's back to that fuels, weather, and topography, but depending upon the severity of the incident and how well it's developed and how fast, firefighters have to weigh if they have a better chance of containing the fire in order to minimize the damage, or if it is so far gone or there's not enough resources that they really need to focus on minimizing damage at an acute level by going to each individual structure to defend it while fire spreads around it.
Okay. Well, as a homeowner, what are the things that we can do in advance?
Absolutely. There's a number of agencies throughout the county, state, federal, and local, that will come perform an on-site inspection with you
Oh, nice.
at your
Okay.
home. It's
Okay.
free. They'll come take a look at your property. Basically, you just take a walk. And these are people who know wildland fire. They know the fuels. They know development. They know subdivision and how fire moves and what impacts it has. They stay well studied on some of the latest strategies. They get versed in the tactics, and they'll come and they'll walk around your home and give you some suggestion. Maybe it's thinning out some deadfall. Maybe it's cleaning up the forest floor. Maybe it's planting a certain type of shrubbery that really has a high resistance to fire.
Oh, I didn't know there was such a thing.
There's a few. There's not many in our climate, in our area,
Okay, yeah.
but there is some. And maybe there's places where even watering once a week makes a difference. Maybe
Yeah.
it's mowing a little bit further out. Maybe it's the type of shingles. Maybe it's moving the wood pile away from the under the deck or right against the siding of the house. Most people are very surprised to learn that houses, structures, whether it be a shop, barn, your primary residence, whatever, do not burn in the initial flame front. They burn moments to minutes afterwards.
Why is that?
The approaching flame front is usually moving so quickly that it follows a primary. Fire is an animal that follows the path of least resistance. It is hard to burn a structure. Fire will follow the natural fuel lines.
Okay.
The ember shower, both ahead of the flaming front where it's dropping embers, and the larger the fire and the more developed it is, the further out that those embers can fall, sometimes up to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards. In larger fires that you often see on TV, that can be miles.
Really?
That flaming embers, whether it's a piece of bark, a pine cone, a twig, will fall, and those land in gutters that are full of dry leaves or pine needles. Those land in that wood pile that's stored right against your house.
Right.
The wind blows those up underneath and gets caught in a bird box. It gets caught somewhere in a wood shake shingle, and they'll sit there. And when that initial flaming front passes, and then you have the atmospheric heat that is behind the flaming front, which can raise the atmospheric temperature, 20, 40, 50 degrees, as we would feel it, is when your house catches on fire.
Oh, amazing. All right, well, let's go to floods. Because we on occasion have flooding here. Not often, but what is the response from your office to flooding?
Flood is an animal all its own. It happens every year in one way or another. Sometimes there's not much you can do about it. The best thing you can do is be aware of where your property is located to see if it has vulnerability to flooding. And if so, is to take proper precaution. Have sandbags, have bags ready, have important documents so that when that time of year and that season rolls around, you're prepared to do what's necessary for you, your family, in the best interest of your family unit.
Well, now I know that there's an alert system that people can sign up for. Tell me about that.
There is. So years ago, Yellowstone County, I remember even as a child growing up, the siren system. It was audible. It was throughout the county, and it got tested once a week. And the alert system that is in place now, and I think it's been here since around 2015. Again, I just started in August, but they had decided for the purposes of the cost of maintenance of those sirens, the aging technology, there wasn't a lot of parts and pieces available.
Oh, sure.
They decided to go with an electronic or app-based system. The initial system that they used was called Code Red. It's an app you can download on your phone. You sign up, you subscribe to the way you want to be alerted and what you want to be alerted to. And then here recently, the city and county, and I believe school district too, went in together, the three parties, and purchased a system called Everbridge.
Okay.
And Everbridge is, again, free to the end user, to the public. You can go on, in fact, it's even on the website there. There's a place that says sign up now. You put your name, your address, you select the kinds of things you wish to be notified about. You can enter cell phones, more than one, several. You can enter your home phone, business phone, cabin phone, email, text. And under certain types of conditions and warnings, those sources would be notified should an impending large threat. And it's not used every day to say, hey, there's your average summer thunderstorm.
No, these are real alerts.
These are things for tornado, for example. There's a large tornado approaching, and take cover. There is also the module, and to my knowledge, it hasn't been well exercised as of yet, that can be a little more neighborhood or community specific, so that if something is only happening in a certain part of Billings or Laurel or Broadview or Custer,
that area
it can hit
gets
just that area.
Yeah, so the rest of us wouldn't hear it.
So back to your wildland fire example, is if potentially if there's a need to evacuate just one subdivision, a line can be drawn around it, and then everybody who has an address point or that is physically located within that circle would be advised to please leave the area. Yeah.
Okay, and you had mentioned it's kind of a geofence, so if you happen to drive through it, it's going to ping you, it's going to get you. Okay, so what about escaping a house fire? What should families or individuals, how do you plan for that?
There's a number of different ways, but the reality is have a plan. And sometimes that plan is just having the discussion.
Yeah.
Right? It's very convenient for everyone to go home to their safe spaces and assume that there's no internal hazard there. And really there's a lot of hazard in the home. Everything from mixing chemicals to electrical to lightning to who knows what. And the best thing you can do is have the discussion. Stop for just a few moments at a breakfast table or a dinner table or some night when you're a little sleepless, and just think about what that looks like. Where's the exits? Are the windows big enough to get out? Should something happen, what do I hold the most dear that I want to take with me? Your papers, your documents, something that allows you to continue with life during that interim time directly after the fire. Where am I going to go? Do we go to a hotel? Do we go to a family member's house? And then certainly the more the home is occupied with family members, kids, dogs, everything else, having a plan for what that looks like. Where do they go? How do we get them out? Who do we tell? One of the first things that responding forces always wonder is the house occupied? Maybe we know it's on fire.
Well, and so it's important then for every member of the family to meet at the same location.
At the same location. And
when they exit.
And primarily, of course, that's for their safety.
Yeah.
But one of the very first things that some of the very first people who would show up at your unfortunate event are going to wonder is everyone out? And you have to be able to say yes or no with some affirmation.
Yeah.
And not only for yourself and for the health of your family, but if you're uncertain and if there's even a small chance that there is a life in a survivable environment in a house fire, people will risk an awful lot, including up to their own life, to go check.
They're going in.
The more certainty that you can apply to their minds upon arrival, the better.
Okay. What's your take on fire extinguishers, the home variety?
Absolutely have them.
Okay, how many?
It depends on the size and what you have in there, but just a standard, even one, can make a tremendous difference.
Okay.
I think oftentimes people kind of dismiss it because it's something that's been around for so long, and
well, and I have one in a box, which is probably not real smart.
And that's another point is don't just have one, but check it. Because some of those they don't necessarily have an expiration date, but if they're left in a box for a real long time and you pull that out in a moment of panic and sense of urgency, should that not have been taken out and serviced, the powder, the cartridge within it that expels the powder may not be serviceable in that moment.
Does it tell you an expiration on the
There's
device
not necessarily
itself?
an expiration, but almost all of them have a small sight glass or a gauge.
Yeah.
Real small. Even some of them are the size of a quarter and smaller. And there's a range in there, and it tells you good, bad service.
Okay.
And what that is there's a cartridge in most standard fire extinguishers that is pressurized. And when you push that handle, that cartridge pressurizes the tank, expelling the dry chemical inside of it that would then be propelled out the extinguisher towards the base of the flame.
Okay.
If that cartridge has not had service in quite some time, or if the powder, the dry chemical inside of the fire extinguisher, has not been serviced and it's not been moved around, and sometimes you just simply tip them upside down, take a rubber mallet, bounce them off the bottom, move it around a little bit. It keeps it from getting compacted in there in such a way that it would never expel. Just a couple things like that. If you find one that has not, or is showing a need for service, there's various companies around town that can come up. They do it. It's
Right.
fairly inexpensive.
Okay. Now we're getting into winter here. What would be a weather event that would require your office, like a huge snowstorm or ice storm or?
So my office looks at pretty much everything always.
Okay.
And our office is really about taking readiness measures. A great example in winter is a very substantial winter storm that drops 2, 3, 4 feet, a very extended cold event that prompts power outages. It's coordinating between private entities and public responders. It's public messaging, working with responder agencies. You're not likely going to see myself show up at your home fire or in your driveway full of snow. But you're going to see behind the scenes coordination between various entities and agencies of public utilities or private utilities, public safety services, working with various levels of government on who needs what, where as a result of any certain kind of emergency. So super maybe surprise snowstorms. We've had those that, it called for an inch and we got a foot. And not that a foot of snow is an emergency, but what if it's 45 below? There were some instances even last winter where very frigid temperatures, wind chills down in the 40s and 60s, and there was entire neighborhoods that lost power.
Wow.
Where do those people go when they have young children? How do they eat? Those kinds of things.
Well, and I'm thinking too, more recently, the big wind storms that we had, knocking down trees and structures in some cases.
Yeah.
How would your office respond to something like that?
It depends.
Yeah.
But it's mostly touching base. One, try to know that it's coming and try to get the message out. I mean, when you look at the greater Yellowstone County, we actually live in a very safe area. You can turn on your choice of news channels and you can find various parts of this country that live in far less fortunate places. They're subject to earthquakes daily. They're subject to large hurricanes. They're subject to tremendous flooding. And the greater Billings area in Yellowstone County is actually really a pretty good place to live.
Pretty safe here.
In things like a windstorm, it's try to have the awareness that it's coming, touching base with, say, public works departments, responder agencies, and having collection sites so that if your tree blows down, we know who needs to take it and where you can go, so that if you call and say, where can I take this thing, or who should I call, all of that information is there.
So you're coordinating, it sounds like, with the city in their efforts to clean up as well.
Yep, so in my role, I act as the emergency manager for the city of Laurel, the city of Billings, the town of Broadview, and all of Yellowstone County. And in
It's
most
big territory.
It is, and in most cases, a lot of it is just coordination, having communication, awareness of situational awareness of what's coming, what it means. We tend to deal with the same things annually.
Right.
Yeah, every spring it does flood. Every summer we do burn.
Right.
And every fall we have wind.
Yeah.
And every winter it snows. And there's those one-offs. The one that comes to mind is the Father's Day tornado.
Yeah.
I think that was in the year 2010. I was
yep.
actually still doing firefighting work then,
Yeah.
but there's the one-off kinds of things. But
Well, that was interesting, that tornado, because at the time I was in a 3-level townhome, and my son in California called, and I knew it was windy. I'd gone down to the lower level. I didn't know it was a tornado. And he called from California and said, "Are you okay? There's a tornado." He knew before I did.
oh wow,
Yeah.
well that's not okay.
I know.
I can't speak to exactly what happened then.
No, and that was 2010. It was
yeah.
a few days ago.
Ideally, I have really pretty consistent communication with our National Weather Service office located
sure.
here in Billings. And that takes a significant portion of eastern Montana, certainly the greater Billings area, all the way over into Bozeman and in that area. We talk fairly consistently. In fact, we are even on a text and chat basis. We have meetings about things and stuff like that. And so ideally, should there be another, and in this line of work, you don't plan for the ifs, you plan for the wins.
Yes.
And then should it never happen, that's even better. But ideally, people would know. And that alerting platform that you had mentioned earlier, that would be the way to
That's
know.
just what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I need to get that on my phone. Well, listen, we are just about out of time, but I want to thank you for being here, Derek.
Yeah.
If you could leave the audience with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think probably the best thing that I could ever encourage anybody to do is take responsibility for your own situation.
Perfect.
Get resilient. Have an idea. Don't put these things out of your mind entirely, and don't be lulled into the sense of place.
Make a plan.
Make a plan. Have a plan, and recognize that just because it doesn't happen
or hasn't
doesn't mean that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people tend to believe that when something happens to them, it may be only and just to them, and that somebody else will come and make their scenario and situation 100% better. The reality is we live in Montana, and it's a big place, and there's not always people who can come and do that. The more resilience you have developed inside of your own routine in life, the better off your situation will be.
Good to know. Well, thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Sure appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us on Your County. We'll see you next time.